Hello, everyone, and welcome to the 6th Field Notes Live event. My name is Lance Brewington, and I'm the MLRA Soil Survey Leader here in Lawrence County, South Carolina, and the Field Notes Region 3 and 7 representative. As a regional representative, I serve on the Field Notes Review Committee. The Review Committee solicits and selects topics for each webinar. We have selected 2 exciting topics for you today, and we encourage you to ask questions at any time using the Q&A panel. The Q&A panel should open by default. However, if for some reason your Q&A panel does not open, simply click on the question mark icon located on the right side of your screen. For closed captions, turn on the live caption button located in the lower right corner. Today's session is being recorded. Recorded sessions are available in Teams on the Field Notes channel at the National Soil Survey Center's YouTube channel. Again, thank you for joining us. I hope you enjoyed today's session. With that, I'd like to turn it over to Dave Hoover to tell you a little more about today's webinar. Dave?
Good morning and welcome to all that are attending. I have a professional society meeting of the Nebraska Society of Professional Soil Scientists on Thursday, and I was looking through some old notes for that. In 1985, I was the president of that association, and we used to get monthly newsletters. So it was 1 month apart that I got any information on what was going on, and then only within my state. I did not get newsletters from other states, but every now and then I did get notices on what was going on. We've come a long way since then with communications, as is evidenced by this webinar. Our number 6 in a series, I think that's great. Also at that time, our dominant topic was field soil survey, since we were still doing the initial soil survey for the country. Now we have a lot of other activities that are going on, a lot of new techniques, a lot of new methods, a lot of new data sources, and these field note webinars are a great way to find out about some of that. So today we have 2 presentations. Our first presentation is by Alex Stum from Temple, Texas, who's going to be talking about the Upper Missouri River Basin soil rankings to cite soil climate stations. Sorry, Alex, butchered the title, but you'll do a much greater job with the presentation. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Dave. Let me share my screen now. All right. Thank you, Paul, and thank you, David, for that introduction. And I want to give credit to Annie Oxford for the great soil and landscape pictures included in this presentation. So the Missouri River is the longest river in the U.S. It has a long history of historic floods. The floods in the 1940s prompted the Flood Control Act of 1944 in response to their soggy constituents. A system of 6 dams were made along the Missouri River to control flooding, but also provide other benefits such as irrigation, recreation, and hydroelectric generation. They impound 3 of our nation's 5 largest reservoirs. These dams and reservoirs are managed by the Army Corps of Engineers. But man's puny arm failed to stop the Missouri. In the spring and early summer of 2011, this system of dams failed to keep back floodwaters as a result of heavy snowpack in the headwaters and lower elevations, followed by record rainfall in the spring, which led to runoff on already saturated soils. The Army Corps of Engineers was forced to open floodgates, resulting in some of the worst flooding along the Missouri River, worst flooding ever. It was determined that more information about snowpack and soil moisture at lower elevation would have provided a signal for the Corps to release more water early on to make more headspace for these waters. Instead, water had to be released downstream into already swollen rivers, or river, I should say. And again in 2019, rains fell on low elevation snowpack, covering frozen earth, leading to another flood event along the Missouri. Angry constituents yet again fueled legislative action. The Corps was charged with establishing a soil climate monitoring system to better anticipate what might be coming into the rivers. They sought our input as they recognized the soil landscape as a critical piece to understanding these hydrologic events. And I would reemphasize Chad's point from last week. This has been a major inter and intra-agency cooperation from the NRCS, the Army Corps of Engineers, and the state mesonettes. The Corps wants a system that uniformly represents the soil and the climate above and below the ground. These will be set up like the scan sites. When completed, it will be a system of 540 stations maintained by the respective state mesonettes. It involves upgrading existing mesonettes with soil climate observation equipment and installing around 400 new ones. While it'd be nice to have a station to understand every tax in the Upper Missouri, that of course is not practical. So we devised an analysis to determine the dominant soil types within each Huck 8 watershed, and that is the unit of our analysis. 6 soil characteristics which can be easily determined or estimated in the field and relate to soil landscape and soil water properties were selected for this analysis. The soil parent material, geomorphic landform, percentage of clay content 0 to 10 centimeters, percentage of clay content 20 to 50 centimeters, depth to restrictive feature, and the US soil taxonomy grade group. Parent material and geomorphic landscape were used as means to stratify the landscape for each watershed, and the soil characteristics were summarized within each geomorphic position for each parent material. Parent material facilitates the stratification of landscape into broad areas that share general soil properties, and it also helps distinguish areas which both collect and shed water. Parent material generally represents broader scale patterns in the landscape, while geomorphic landforms break things down at a more local scale. 6 parent material types derived from GNATSCO are found in the basin: alluvium, colluvium, aeolian, glacial, lacustrine, and residuum. Generalized geomorphic landforms were derived from a 30-meter NED data set and generalized as hilltops, high flats, side slopes, narrow valleys and drainages, and low flats or plains. Here's an example of the parent material where dark brown is residuum, green is alluvium, with a smattering of aeolian and colluvium. Here's an example of the generalized geomorphic hill slope positions with shaded relief above for comparison. So clay content directly influences the water holding capacity, the ecological and vegetation potential, soil structure, hydraulic conductivity, infiltration, soil erosion, soil development, other things. And depth restrictive feature also influences the soil water holding capacity, influences how water moves laterally through the soil, and also drives vegetation and ecological potential. Depth was summarized by the 4 soil depth classes. The Opal soil series is an example of a moderately deep soil. It has a weathered paralithic contact with shale. The modal soil taxonomy at the grade group level was used. And there are 171 grade groups described in the Upper Missouri Basin, but only 26 were found to be dominant, and I'll describe what we mean by dominant later. So here's the general approach. Well, first of all, actually, here's a nice example of a hapludol and an argiostol, with the argiostol from representing soils in the wetter climes of the basin. So the analysis can generally be described as a cartographic model which assigns a suitability score on related to how well a site matches up with the dominant soils within a watershed. Dominant soils were determined by summarizing the 6 soil characteristics by a process akin to performing a sequence of nested zonal statistics. The cartographic model developed for this analysis has 2 main steps. First, summarize the predominant soil characteristics in each Huck 8 watershed, again, the chosen unit of analysis. The second step is then to assign one of the identified suites of soil characteristics from each watershed to each grid cell, and then score or rank the potential sites therein. The grid system is centered on 104 degrees west, which largely conforms with the Montana-Dakota borders and the Wyoming-Nebraska border, using a custom Albers equal area projection. So each Huck 8 is stratified by parent material. Here's an example from the Upper Niobrara. Note that 10 cells are centered on the watershed. The reason soils are summarized by Huck-8 and not by the individual grid cells is to better capture the range of soil characteristics across the basin. Some soils, while never predominant as large contiguous bodies, are nevertheless geographically extended. Summarizing by cells would result in placing sites on the same handful of soils, which, while dominant, would leave large holes in our understanding of the soil water dynamics on extensive soils. Within a watershed, proportion of parent material is calculated. Again, in the Niobrara watershed as an example, this approach is taken as a soil of similar source material and equivalent positions in the landscape often have related soil properties. As can be seen, aeolian is the dominant parent material in this watershed. Therefore, 7 sites of the 10 should be placed on aeolian-derived soils. Within each of these source materials, the proportion of geomorphic landforms is summarized. Sites are allocated to each parent material landform proportionally. We see 2 sites should be placed on hill slopes and low flats derived on each hill slopes and low flats derived from aeolian material. Once the dominant source materials and the corresponding landforms have been determined within a watershed, the dominant soil properties within these strata are estimated. Thereby, for each parent material landform suite, a suite of soil criteria are established. To uniformly distribute monitoring sites, a grid system is used, and each cell was assigned a parent material landform suite of soil criteria based on the relative occurrence of each soil found within them. So each pixel is scored 1 through 6. 1 means a site meets at least one of the 6 soil criteria from the assigned soil suite, and ideally there would be lots of sites with a 6, which meets all criteria. Zoomed in, we can see that the potential sites in cell X20 are representing aeolian soils on high flats. Note the difference in rankings along the cell boundary. Pixels in cell X21 were ranked per a different set of criteria, those typical of aeolian soils found on low flats. Note that there are fairly big differences, or large differences in the clay content of those in those soil suites, but both very deep as would be expected in aeolian soil. So there are obviously many limitations with an analysis using this approach. First of all, it's not site-specific product, rather it's most likely product based on GNATSCO. Steep areas were masked out. In this case, they didn't want any sites on slopes greater than 10%. But we also know there could be a local flat or a local steep in either of those 2 categories, and the steep areas or not so steep areas. GNATSCO is an aggregated product, and local variability is to be expected. Also, the 30-meter pixels, there's variability and edge effects. And one challenge was that in some cells, there are few high-scoring pixels. That's a result of if you have 15 sites within a watershed, you could potentially have 15 unique soils. Some of them are repeated suites, but if not, you end up getting down there a pretty low percentage of extent in the watershed. Other approaches could have been considered. Perhaps hierarchical clustering algorithm would have been an interesting approach, maybe a more fruitful approach. But this is the approach we came up with, and it was fairly well received by the Army Corps of Engineers. Many of you should recognize this slide. It provides a perfect example of kind of the so what. This is an uncalibrated simulation of runoff during a hypothetical runoff event. This kind of simulation cannot come to fruition without an understanding of the soil water dynamics of the soils in the landscape. These sites will be critical for hydrologic modeling efforts in this basin. To successfully model how water moves through the landscape, we need to represent all the major soil components of the landscape, or there will be holes in our understanding, and our models will be monolithic and too generalized to be useful. And with that, I should check out if there's any questions.
Thank you, Alex. I'm not seeing any questions. Let's give it another minute or or so, and we'll see if anything pop up.
Very good.
Feel free to sing or dance if you.
I didn't practice anything, so we best not.
That was good analysis that you did. I will let folks know that if you do have a question for Alex, you're still welcome to type it in. Excuse me, we'll try to get answers posted to all the questions, and but you're also free to contact Alex on your own too. All right, I'm not seeing any questions pop up, Alex, so thank you again, and we'll move on with our field notes. I do want to remind folks that the next webinar is scheduled for October 12th. If you like what you've seen today, like what you've seen on the previous 5 webinars, please consider doing a topic of your own and presenting to fellow scientists. I hope you've noticed during the course of these that there are a variety of topics. Again, this is a way to find out what's going on across the country. So contact your local field notes representatives and get on the schedule. Our next presentation is by Meredith Albers from Colchester, Vermont, who will be speaking on the most excellent titled Video Killed the Cubicle Star, with a subtitle of Creating Quick Training Videos to Share with Coworkers When We Are All Remote Working During a Pandemic. Meredith, the floor is yours.
Thank you for the introduction there, Dave. And you were the first person to point out to me this happens to be the 40th anniversary of MTV airing their very first music video, which was Video Killed the Radio Star as performed by the Buggles. There have been a few people since then, so you're not alone. I didn't know that. I titled it this because we're not in cubicles anymore. Almost anything we would do in the office, like when I started, we're having to do remotely because of COVID flexibilities, reduced office capacity, etc. So I've started creating quick videos to help provide some of that on-the-job training that I was able to get sitting side by side with my coworkers in the office and in the cubicle. The main purposes of these quick videos I've been creating, and you could create too if this is something that you're interested in, is primarily to teach a job task. So, explicitly, this is how you do X. Another thing I've created videos for might be to provide explanation, contents, or additional background. We might be in a meeting or there's a long email exchange where some different topics are being brought up, and there may not be time in that moment to provide some of this background information and training for new members of our team. But with a video, I can fire that off later that day, send it to my coworker, and they can review it whenever it's convenient for them. You think about some of the scheduling conflicts we have working from home. This has really been beneficial in that way. They could be for critical job items or just more general awareness. So anything where you think a video might be a nicer format to kind of demonstrate something or talk about it rather than, the encyclopedic write-up you might provide somebody instead. So the primary way I've been doing these videos and creating them is using Microsoft Teams. I found out pretty quickly you could host a meeting and you could record that meeting, and there's nothing that stops you from having a meeting just all by yourself and recording that. So in Microsoft Teams, in the window on the left-hand side, you have this calendar icon, and that's one that you can click on to get to this interface where you have a Meet Now button. And you click that, and then it will give you the option to rename it, but you don't have to. And you just click Start Meeting. Once you're in that meeting with just yourself, and it tries to get you to invite other people, but you don't have to, go ahead and click your share content icon just like you would normally. And I always recommend including computer sound, especially if you're demonstrating something from the computer. That way the alerts and beeps and noises will come through in your video recording. Then you need to pick what you're going to share. I always recommend picking one of the screens, so your actual monitor. That way, if there's a pop-up, you know it's going to come through and they're going to see it. Sometimes when you share just a program window, if a pop-up comes, it messes with the display a little bit. So on your side of things, you'll have the classic red boundary that displays around the screen or program you share. And this is a screen clipping of what it looks like for me as a presenter. And that this is just a desktop background. It happens to be a historic soil survey map from Vermont. If you click on the minimized meeting window to bring back the call screen to access your controls, but your video recording isn't going to show that red boundary. So once you bring up the meeting controls, which you can do also from the taskbar, you need to access that menu to start the recording just like you would if you were in any meeting. So the 3 red dots and start recording. And of course, the recording starts a little bit before that blue bar pops up, letting you know that you're recording. But I always try to wait until I see that blue bar to start my content. That way I know it's not cutting me off. When you're done recording, just go back to this menu and scroll down and it'll say stop recording and click that there. I like to do that within the menu because it allows me to start and stop multiple times, create multiple recordings. Maybe I need to redo something. Maybe I want to record what's one step at a time with a separate video for each. If I hit leave, it will stop the meeting and any recording. So if I needed to record another version, I'd need to join the meeting again. Now, all of those recordings are going to show up in the meeting chat. Once they're processed, you can view them. And you can view them by just clicking on the meeting preview or opening it in OneDrive. And if you need to navigate to your chat in Teams, remember there's that left-hand icon to access it. If you've left the meeting, you can click join to rejoin it if you want all of your meetings, to have the same name in them. But then to preview them, you will end up leaving Teams. And this is new as of a couple of weeks ago that it ends up in OneDrive. So when you open the meeting recording in OneDrive, it's just like any other SharePoint file where you can save it, you can share it, you can download it, you can delete it. And that's really nice. That's a nice feature. All the meeting recordings used to be stored in Microsoft Stream. Something to be aware of, if you're sharing the file directly from OneDrive, you can give them a link or an email to access it, but drill down into the settings and see exactly what you're giving them permission to do, because by default, it tends to block anyone from downloading this file or editing the file. And maybe it's something that you want them to be able to download or edit. So go ahead and dig into the details to find out what exactly you're giving them access to. So I mentioned Microsoft Stream. That was the original video streaming service where all of our meeting recordings were saved by default. And as of, last week or the week before, they switched to having everything saved to OneDrive. And that's occurring because Microsoft is merging Stream into the OneDrive and SharePoint ecosystem. You can still use Stream though. They haven't set a retirement date for Stream Classic, as they call it now. Once the retirement date is set, it'll still be 9 to 12 months before it actually, is retired and you won't be able to use it anymore. So it's worth it to learn some of the functionality of Microsoft Stream, because that functionality will end up carrying over to the final product in OneDrive and SharePoint. So you can just type in web.microsoftstream.com to access it. And if it doesn't automatically log you in, which it should, you can always just click sign in. And then if you're on a government network, it should connect just fine. So once you're in Microsoft Stream, this is kind of what your profile browser window looks like. Under the Create tab, you can also record a screen or video. You might see that you can upload videos too. So those video files you can still share in Screen. If you click record screen or video, it will pop up this new window. where you want to set your camera and microphone settings in the lower left-hand corner, and you can select screen only or screen and camera if you want to record a video of yourself talking. Usually I want to show somebody something besides my face, so I am frequently sharing screen only. And then when you're ready to go, you hit this red button, but if you're sharing a screen, this doesn't record automatically, it will actually just take you to the next pop-up window, which is this one where you're choosing what to share. And again, it gives you kind of the options to share your entire screen, a particular program window, or even a Microsoft Edge tab. And again, I always recommend sharing the entire screen, so whatever pop-up occurs, the person you're viewing the video is going to be able to see that. Again, I always like to click to share the system audio, because you can't turn that on once you've started. And then when you click share, it will start recording. A new window will pop up, and it will actually count down 3, 2, 1 and start recording. And you'll notice that this has a time that you've been recording, and then it also has a maximum time of 15 minutes, and it is a hard cutoff. You are done recording these screen captures and stream at 15 minutes. You can pause your recording at any time and start it over again. Or, once you're finished, you can just hit next in the lower right-hand corner. Once you hit next, another window pops up, allows you to review your recording. So you can actually click over here and click play. This was a recording of me working through the PowerPoint, and so why you see a screenshot of the PowerPoint in the background. You can trim it. So if you stumbled at the beginning, but you got started better, you can actually move these magenta sliders. They start all the way at the edge, and you can scoot them down to delete sections of the video that you don't want at the beginning. You can do the same thing at the end, maybe if you struggled to turn off the recording in a timely fashion. If you want to record it again, just click over in the left-hand corner, and you'll get to delete this draft, start all over with sharing your screen and your settings, and record again. Maybe you just want to start over tomorrow and just delete this. You can hit the X up in the upper right-hand corner to do that. Or if you're ready to upload it to stream, you'd click in the lower right-hand corner. If you're uploading it to stream, as it's uploading, it gives you the option to edit some of the details. So you can give it a name, a description, a language, permissions. You can even download the video file once it's done processing and save it on your computer. And once it's done processing, you have the option to save it as a draft in your videos and stream, or you publish it. I want to revisit the video permissions because you should be aware that any video you post and stream by default is set so anyone in your company can view this video, and I believe that is anyone in the USDA. It's not necessarily a problem. A lot of what we're discussing is not sensitive information, but it tends to clutter up everyone else's search results if you've made your video available and it's popping up as something they should watch. So I always uncheck this just to try to keep the internet, a little more contained. To edit the permissions, groups and channels and things like that, you can just click on this update video details text link. Once you do that, you get this other video where you can edit all of those different aspects together all at once and add individual people or groups, etc., that would have permissions to view it. Again, making sure that you uncheck allow everyone in your company to view this video unless you want them to. Once you're done, you can go ahead and click publish. Now, how do you keep track of all of those videos? Once you get a lot of them made, it can get kind of confusing sometimes. One way, and this is another nice feature of OneDrive, since they're all getting stored on your computer, is you can view them just in your browser, your folder explorer, and you can delete them just like any other file. You could name them so that you know exactly what they are, and this is a nice, easy way to edit them and share them. In Vermont, we actually have a training library set up in SharePoint where we can upload links. So this one is actually a link, and then this is an actual video file. So they have some information within there. It's kind of a one-stop shop for our staff in Vermont to access training resources. Another thing you can do in Microsoft Stream is create a channel. Again, that was under the Create tab in Stream. You go down to Channel, and then you have to assign it to a group. So this channel is a bunch of videos on how to use the HL determination tool that's been set up in the NRCS Vermont group. So anyone in our group can view that. The groups are the same as the teams, by the way, the Microsoft Teams groups. Or there's just the good old-fashioned Word document. I use this when I've got everything stored on Stream. I can copy just a web link into a Word document. I always like to add a title and approximate time length so people can find it, know how long it's going to take them if they have time to view it at that moment. And then I like to add additional context or content about the video as well. And I find that this is a really nice way to share the videos and what I've been doing with some of the staff in Vermont that I share videos with. So thanks. This slide has just got some tips and tricks and lessons learned on it. I actually did a recording of this presentation in case there were technical difficulties. Paul could have just pressed play for you. So that pre-recording is available in Microsoft Stream. And then I also did a demonstration video about 15 minutes as well, where I click through everything live for you guys to view if you have an interest in more information how to do these. And that's what I got.
Thank you, Meredith.
Thank you.
We'll give another minute here to see if any questions pop up, but it was a great presentation about making presentations.
Meredith, can these videos be easily posted on something like YouTube or something like?
You can download the video file, and I've never posted anything to YouTube, but I would imagine that you could, if you can just upload a video file to YouTube.
All right, well, we give folks just a little bit more time to write any questions for either Alex or for Meredith. We'll remind people that the next webinar again is October 12th.